Good evening and welcome to the show. This is the First Amendment, historically speaking. I will be your host. My name is Brother Frederick Douglass Dixon. And as always, we would like to thank UPTV and their entire staff for allowing for this time, for allowing us to come in front of you and forward what we think is esoteric information that will provide the light of understanding under the searchlight of truth. And also for those who will watch today, I think today will be something historical that we'll discuss, and we will try to make sure that we pull apart some of the nuances of this subject so that we can inject what we think is important to the mainstream meta-narrative. So today I would like to use our historical background to discuss the death of the great Muhammad Ali. Now, lots of times we understand that Muhammad Ali is looked to now as the greatest of all time. 74 years of age, he left us, and he left a very lasting impression upon the United States and the world in itself. So when we think about his professional boxing career, we think about his social justice career, if you will, and we begin to see the transformation of someone who goes from an athlete to an activist to almost an iconic figure. So to study this upward trajectory would make a lot of sense, because today when we talk about Muhammad Ali, we begin to talk about Muhammad Ali in ways that were not present when he was a young man. So Muhammad Ali was looked to as one of the most hated men on the planet at one time. He goes from relative obscurity to literally overnight, if you will, one of the most familiar faces on the planet. So today in his life, as great as his life was, we want to bring some clarity, because we will today, which marks the funeral or the celebration of Muhammad Ali's life, we will be overwhelmed with what we know to be media's portrayal of Muhammad Ali, which in some regards is not accurate. And in other regards, at best, they're half-truths. So we want to make sure that what we know historically, being accurate, will come to light and add to the current picture about Muhammad Ali. So I want to go back to him being born in Louisville and Kentucky being forever or historically a border state regarding slavery and Jim Crow. So he grew up in a time that was indeed overwhelmed with Jim Crow transition and the civil rights movement. So he lived through a very tumultuous time. He saw things as a young man that reverted back to Jim Crow South in a border state. So when we begin to talk about his life as a child, people talk about the way he was brought to the sport of boxing. Someone stole his bike. From there he became upset, which led him to going to a gym, which led him to becoming a very good amateur, winning a gold medal 1960 in Rome. And it also goes to what he thought was important. Now, we know that when we talk about sports in itself builds character, because it makes one sacrifice, it challenges one's discipline. And I don't know if there's a sport, especially a team sport, that can compare to the discipline one must have in an individual sport. So when we think about boxing, perhaps the most brutal game, well, nowadays we have the MMA, but during that time, it was very popular. Boxing was a very popular sport. So in itself, you have the backdrop of Jack Johnson, heavyweight champion, Joe Louis, heavyweight champion, and then comes along this brash young man they called the Louisville Lip, Cassius Clay. So during this time, Cassius Clay is in his amateur life, he is about 6'3", close to 6'3", 6'4", with the body of a lightweight and the skill of every particular best portion of a fighter. And he'll eventually become a heavyweight champion, but he still had the feat, the technique, the skill, and the quickness of a light heavyweight in a heavyweight's frame. So it makes him an anomaly. And that's not the only thing that makes Muhammad Ali an anomaly. What makes Muhammad Ali an anomaly is, as we think about him in his totality today being the day that we're celebrating, then we don't go over the true part of Muhammad Ali. History has whitewashed, erased, eliminated, or marginalized the true history of Muhammad Ali, especially during the time which we could consider the most challenging in his life. Now, we understand that in 1960 he wins a gold medal, which is the height of one's amateur career. But what we don't talk about is that Muhammad Ali felt that Jim Crow oppressed him and people who looked like him so very much that he eventually threw his gold medal, symbolically, threw his gold medal in the river and didn't want any part of what that gold medal stood for. So he was beginning to look at life from the lens of being oppressed and being one that everyone looked to because of his prowess, so he had special privileges, if you will. But he never forgot the masses of people who looked just like him, who didn't have those skills, who did not have those opportunities or that access to become famous and rich. So he made lots of choices, beginning in 1964 when he upsets Sonny Liston. And when he becomes the heavyweight champion of the world, the very next day, he renounces his name as Cassius Clay. He takes the name given to him by the most honorable Elijah Muhammad as Muhammad Ali. Now, a lot of folks don't know what Muhammad and Ali mean. Muhammad means worthy of praise, and Ali means to be exalted. So we understand that he was given this name because of the special portions of his aspects and his character. So now, right here becomes a very pressing point for us to make clear. With Muhammad Ali changing his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali in 1964, we have to think about the days and times. And even before that, during his training for the first Sonny Liston fight, he began to listen. He began to read. He began to become a part of reading the literature from the Nation of Islam. So even during the time when he was about to fight Sonny Liston, Malcolm X joined him at his camp in Miami. And this shook the world up. Now you have to remember, in 1964, Malcolm X is Malcolm X and perhaps his brightest light. This is prior to his death. So Malcolm X is a very popular person, but popular for what? Popular for being radical, popular for being unapologetically black, popular for being what folks would say is the exact opposite of what Americans are to be in 1964. And now he's beginning to mentor Muhammad Ali. This in itself makes those who are boxing promoters, those who get paid the most off these sporting events, it's definitely causing a disruption. So he understood this. So when he changes his name after he wins the heavyweight championship, there's no longer a secret about how he's going to deal and how he's going to use his platform as the heavyweight champion of the world. And I want to read a quote to you all that makes a lot of sense when we discuss the idea of how Muhammad Ali felt when he changed his name. We have pursued the shadow. They have obtained the substance. We have performed the labor. They have received the profits. We have planted the vines. They have eaten the fruits of them. He understood that because of his prowess, he would eventually become a money cash machine for those around him. Now we have to look directly to how he marketed himself, a brilliant person, a brilliant marketing strategist himself. He called himself the greatest. In a sport that's very brutal and people walk around and leave that sport with lifelong scars, Muhammad Ali would tell you, I'll fight him 12 rounds in a telephone booth and I'm pretty as a girl. We understand that he had more than just the gift of gab. He began to learn about himself. He began to come into the knowledge of Islam, which only means the total submission to the will of God. So he's changed his name. He's no longer wants the name of the slave master. He has, at this point, become the baddest man on the planet. If you jump in the ring with him, you're bound to lose. But not only that, he's following the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. He's making him a new man. So the name Muhammad Ali, if we compare it to Cassius Clay, he's accepted all over the world with this name, Muhammad Ali. It's a God-given name. It has nothing to do with the slave master Clay's name. So he becomes a new person. He's reading what is prescribed as one in the Nation of Islam. So I heard a Jewish reporter say this morning on one of the famous news outlets that when Muhammad Ali changed his name in 1964 and said he was a part of the Nation of Islam, that would be like a prime athlete today saying that he wanted to be a part of ISIS. Well, I thought about it. And I think to say that is a very strong statement. And I think it does have some truth to it. But I think when we think about Muhammad Ali, it scared the entire world, especially those who were the closest to him, who stood to gain the most. And then the United States in itself, in total turmoil because of the civil rights movement. Now, you have to realize that the Nation of Islam is not looking to the civil rights movement the same way that Dr. King is. So this is a total paradigm shift. So we know that some of the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad point directly to white men, white women, and white population being the devil. This is an exact reversal of what we know from Christianity. So this book, Message to the Black Man in America by the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. If you've ever seen pictures of Muhammad Ali, there's one in a very famous, on the cover of a very famous Ring magazine when he becomes champion, where he's reading this book. Now, that didn't happen by happenstance or coincidence. It happened because he wanted the world to see that this is what he was studying. He was studying about himself. He was studying something that was looked to as radical. So now he becomes the most hated man on the planet. And he says that he's not going to fight in the Vietnam War. So we know in 1967 that he is removed from boxing, champion removed from boxing, title stripped, no longer has a way of what we know as earning power, doing what we can consider his prime years, 25 years old to 28 years. We understand that that was done not by coincidence or happenstance. This is by design, to quiet Muhammad Ali, to lessen his importance to the world when we know that he's accepted all over the world by this divine name. He becomes the people's champ. But the people who? Which people? Not the people who control the boxing game, not those who control the government who gave him the title of a draft dodger. So now he's talking to people who are living in the bowels of society. He's using himself as an example. I will no longer eat pork. I will no longer drink alcohol. I will respect and protect the black woman. He will in himself become a member of the Nation of Islam within the fruit of Islam, which is the army. He holds a position as minister as well. So he is the antithesis of what the champ is supposed to be. This may even be making him to white America a worse champ than Jack Johnson. So now when we talk about Muhammad Ali today and those who will mourn him, I think that it'd be wise for us to look deeply at his life without shaded views, without warped values, without injecting into this particular situation that Muhammad Ali was the greatest of all time. Not many people felt that way when he was at his worst in their eyes in 1967 and through his career. So to bring honesty to this situation, we have to make sure that we look at those who called Muhammad Ali a draft dodger, who said that he was no longer the people's champ because he did not want to fight in the Vietnam War. Well, Dr. King took a stance on why I opposed the war in Vietnam, and he became vilified. So it wasn't just Muhammad Ali who took a stand. Lots of people became vilified over this abominable war. But not many had the fortitude, had the wherewithal to say that I'm going to remove myself from my slave name. I'm going to become something for the rest of the world to see, a shining example of what a black man in America can be. And I'm going to follow the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad to bring the light of understanding under the searchlight of truth to this situation. So now today, when we look at Muhammad Ali, most people enjoy talking about the greatness of Muhammad Ali. Today, we have an unlimited amount of quotes from Muhammad Ali. 9 times out of 10, when you see a sports fan, when we begin to talk about those who are the greatest, Muhammad Ali names come up very quickly. But we don't look to the time he was looked to as a menace to society. We don't look to the time where he was looked to as an enemy of the state. And with the FBI and the Freedom of Information Act, they tailed Muhammad Ali until the day he died. He was always worthy of making an impact on those who had not understood the United States government, especially in the situation that Muhammad Ali was in. How they removed his funding, if you will, his ability and his access to provide a living for his family. How he was looked to as perhaps a menace to society. And he stood up. His fortitude was unyielding. Now that's just not regular fortitude. In today's days and times, we don't find many athletes who make counter narrative remarks to what they have already been told to say. So he was not like what we know today. He set the bar very high. And what he came to understand was that not only was the United States government his enemy, he understood those around him who were his enemy. Muhammad Ali, of course, he fought too long. Well, that's one thing about that fighting game, being a prize fighter. One fight too long can turn one's legacy. But I have to be very critical when I say that his condition with Parkinson's. I wonder, and I wonder often, how the medicine was administered to him. Who was involved in prescribing the medicine if this was not a plan to continue to show the world that at one time, the Louisville Lip, the most brash man, the minister Muhammad Ali, can be silenced, and we can watch this in front of the entire world. So in 1996, we see him lighting the torch for the United States Olympic Games. Now, this is an exact opposite to him getting rid of his gold medal in 1960. But we don't want to discuss that about Muhammad Ali. We want to discuss what his Islam brought to the world, not the Islam that he originally adopted with the Nation of Islam, but we like to say that he was grown. He grown into a Sunni Muslim. Well, I want to go back to that same Muhammad Ali who stood up and said that he got no peace in this country and no one fought for him here, so why would he go and fight for a war in Vietnam against people who were as oppressed as him? So we don't like to discuss our true heroes. And when we think about Muhammad Ali in that vein, it's almost very similar to how we think about Brother Malcolm X. Now we have a semblance of acceptance of what Malcolm X was saying, but not when he was saying it, only after he died. So these two men, taught by the exact same man, more specifically, Muhammad Ali understood his role globally. And I cannot look at it any other way but to say the end result was he was silenced. He could not express himself about what was going on now. Those around him have to be looked to in all particular manners. So I say, when we talk about Muhammad Ali and you remove the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, what you have is Cassius Clay. What you have is a fighter. What you have is a heavyweight champion of the world. You don't have an international figure. You don't have the people's champ. You don't have that loved person or beloved black man who was giving the world a shining example of what they had never seen before in their life. An articulate, professional, very serious, disciplined black man in front of the world that was indeed as clever as one could be. His glibness had no end. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Rumble, young man, rumble. Muhammad Ali once said he'd turn off the lights and be in bed before it got dark. We're talking about as quick as possible. Now, when we understand what hip hop and rap is, Muhammad Ali is the forerunner to hip hop and rap because he was indeed rhyming and making sense and giving a show outside of the ring when he was the best pound for pound inside of the ring. But he was unapologetic about the position of white America. He was unapologetic about his teachings. He was unapologetic about what blacks had to do to unify. So yes, Muhammad Ali is indeed one of our greatest people to ever walk this planet. But how do we, as black men, women, and children, allow for the mass media and those who have profited greatly from his life and death to bury him and have a Bill Clinton, have a Billy Crystal represent thoughts from Martin Luther King to Muhammad Ali to Malcolm X? We always find a group who will represent what this great black man meant to America. I find it very disheartening that Bill Clinton and all he did to repress black people, to have the gall to come in front of the world and speak as if he was Muhammad Ali's friend, if there was some sort of connection. I think it's typical. I think it's par for the course. And that's why I'm here right now giving you a counter narrative, something you can think about outside of what they've given you today when we think about Muhammad Ali. We understand that, yes, he was an international figure, but we don't understand the pressures that he went through, how many years that he continued to fight against oppression. And now we want to take the best of his life, put it in a small container, and represent Bill Clinton as the one who would give us thought about him. Entirely hypocritical, entirely American. So we have to be very careful with our heroes, and we have to be very protective. Because if not, as we understand, if we don't tell the story and we don't tell it correctly, then someone else will tell the story. And indeed, it will be told in an incorrect manner. How do we look at Muhammad Ali today if we don't look to him as a warrior who sacrificed greatly till the time he died? If we don't look to him as being the most hated man on the planet during some of his most formidable years as a professional boxer, from being ostracized, from being called militant, from being called a hater. Well, if you remember, one of his quotes said, he said, I don't have a reason to go fight in Vietnam. No Viet Cong ever called me nigger. Let's just think about what he meant. He understood the capitalism in America, and he was not going to be a part of it. And in all phases, there is a religious means that you don't have to fight in the war. But it did not work for Muhammad Ali, the great Muslim. They wanted to use him as an example to break him down in public. And let's look at the trajectory over his entire life. That's exactly what happened. He went from saying things that uplifted people who looked just like him to being silenced to the point where he shook uncontrollably as he lit the Olympic torch in 1996 in Atlanta. I can say, as a black man in America, there is no better example of a warrior, an athlete, a social being than the great Muhammad Ali, who is indeed the greatest fighter of all time. But the example that he set, what he left behind, was all taught to him by a divine leader, teacher, and guide, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now I'm giving you my thoughts, which are severely compacted over 1/2 hour, because 1/2 hour won't do. But what I would have you do is, for all of you all who are looking for something outside of the mainstream narrative that will overwhelm you about Brother Muhammad Ali, what you want to do is you want to look to Sunday, 10 o'clock. The most honorable Louis Farrakhan is going to give his lecture on his friend, on his brother, his counterpart, Muhammad Ali. You can find that at NOI.org. You can stream it live and listen to a counter narrative that's much closer to the center of the story. It's going to give you much more facts that are historically accurate than Billy Crystal doing an impression, than the Jewish media giving us bits and pieces of what they want to use to begin to shape the legacy of Muhammad Ali. So look into the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's address. You'll find someone who was with Muhammad Ali in these dark days. You'll find someone who studied with him. You'll find someone who was with him. I think it's very peculiar that now Muhammad Ali becomes a champion for the people when he was always a champion for his people. Ironic that we have to sit and talk about it today and look to what happened and what's going to happen at his remembrance and the things that are going to happen through those who will speak. I think it's quite ironic. Please make sure that we remember him in his true light. Ladies and gentlemen, this information may in no means change your life, but because truth and you are so very important to me, I just thought you ought to know. I remain with esteem and respect, Brother Frederick Douglass Dixon, a distinguished man of color. Muhammad Ali, Allah's please. Thank you.